Welcome to the Imagine Athena podcast. My name is Candice Holdsworth, and today I spoke with our contributing editor, Robin Gilbert-Jones, about the political outlook for 2018. Between Corbyn and May, who is winning the battle of ideas? Is May presenting a strong enough vision for Brexit? We also look at the cultural watershed that was the Jordan Peterson interview with Cathy Newman on Channel 4 News. Does he represent a new and distinct pushback against identitarians on both the right and the left? I discussed this with Robin Gilbert-Jones over Skype.
So, Rob, what's your outlook for the coming year?
Probably a little bit less pessimistic than it was last year. You know, there do seem to be some real sea changes in culture and politics, which have the potential to be transformative in a positive way, in ways that I haven't really seen maybe for the last couple of years. I think we're coming out of quite a cultural dip. There are still things to be concerned about. I mean, as there always are. The situation in the United States is culturally quite volatile and acrimonious. I do sense a pushback against that. Just, I mean, if nothing else, just from the fact that it's not a natural or harmonious way to be, and most individuals just want to get on with their lives. It places an added kind of burden on them psychologically and socially and culturally just on a daily basis. So I always suspected the identity politics segregationist kind of attitude would be a short-lived thing. It seems to come in cycles every few decades or so. But I'm hoping that is starting to fizzle out somewhat. On the level of Europe, look, I mean, I haven't really been particularly optimistic about Europe for quite a while. I had mixed feelings about Brexit. I chose not to vote in it myself, partly as just it didn't feel like my call. The negotiations don't seem to be going particularly well. I don't think that Theresa May is a good leader. And as a result of not being a good leader, she's not sufficiently protecting the British people by offering a credible enough alternative to the Jeremy Corbyn brand.
May's big failing was that she thought she had it in the bag. She thought she could run on simply not being Corbyn, rather than being something in her own right, running on a strong platform.
You can't run on the negation of an idea. You have to provide an alternative.
Another interesting trend that we've discussed is how the opposition to left-wing identity politics is no longer being steered and dominated by the alt-right, and it seems to be more reasonable forms of liberalism, conservatism, starting to really come to the fore now. Do you think that's going to continue?
I think we're just seeing the beginning of that. I mean, one of my predictions for, I think, 2017, which didn't come true so much, although some progress was made in it, is the rise of the coined term by Ali Rizvi and popularized by Dave Rubin, the new centre, which is sort of basically an attitude of, well, it pops on both your houses, both the left and right, who play identity politics, and a sort of coalescence of reasonable people from both the left and right who have become disillusioned with the identity narrative and kind of coalesce around some kind of common purpose. That's taken longer to enter the public conversation than I would have liked. However, it does seem to be moving apace now. I mean, a very significant Rubicon for that was the Jordan Peterson moment. You know, that interview he did on Cathy Young's show, and I mean, I feel cliched even mentioning it because everybody's talking about it. But that represented the reasonable pushback, I think. She, of course, took the identity politics route and, so you're saying this, so you're saying that, so I as a woman, blah, blah, blah. And he just simply reasonably dismantled everything she said. And that's how one should conduct oneself. And the point is that in so doing, there was no possible way of actually straw manning him as a member of the alt-right. You see, previously with the left-wing identity narrative, when they throw these labels around at people, one of two things tends to happen. Either they are cowed by the effort and afraid of public ostracism, so they cave into the bullying. We've seen a lot of that. You know, people are issuing public apologies for, the most silly and significant thing. The other thing that happens is that someone calls you a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, and you go, okay, I am. I'll own that. And that takes the power away from them. And that is where the alt-right came from. The alt-right was essentially a movement that of very disillusioned and often ne'er-do-well types who had the bright idea of trying to beat identity politics at its own game. So you want to call me a racist? Okay, I'm going to come up with a sort of whole pseudo-intellectual structure to justify my racism. And if I own the labels you throw at me, they don't have power over me anymore. In fact, I can use that power and harness it for myself. Now that this sort of middle tranche is emerging, and you have people like Jordan Peterson, people ostensibly on the left like Dave Rubin, or on the right like Ben Shapiro, or somewhere nebulous like Sam Harris, who essentially take the view, and this is a crucial point that Jordan Peterson has made, is never try to beat your enemy at their own game, because then you adopt their tactics and you become as bad as them. And I think the fact that the alt-right decided to play the identity politics game, it worked for a while. It really drove a kind of social media frenzy of a movement forward. But it ultimately, and I did to some extent predict this would happen, it's sort of burning itself out. Eventually, it begins to disillusion people in the same way that the radical identitarian left does. And the fact that it has become so off-putting, and the fact that the identitarian left has just become more and more and more insane, as we saw with the sort of Brett Weinstein moment last year at Evergreen State College, where they essentially bullied a professor off his own campus, subjecting him to violent threats. Both ends of this horseshoe have become so unpalatable that it naturally filters out reasonable people who end up in the same space and end up speaking to each other. And that is where this new center seems to be coalescing, that isn't based on being a hardcore right-winger. It's simply based on, reasonable people not seeing these perspectives or tactics as reasonable and thereby disagreeing with them and refusing to adopt those tactics themselves. It was inevitably going to happen. It just took a little bit longer. So that, I think, is a real cause for optimism.
Thanks so much for listening. Please do subscribe and check out our website, www.imagineathena.com. Until next time.